All right, we're about to go on a pretty incredible journey, one that stretches over 2,500 years. But we're not tracking some lost civilization or a forgotten empire. Nope. We're tracking a single word and the wild story of how it went from meaning a respected, everyday citizen to an absolute ruler. So let me ask you a question. When I say the word prince, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably royalty, right? Maybe a fairy tale, a Disney character, the heir to some throne, someone just born into massive power and privilege. Okay, hold on to that thought, because where this word started is a universe away from where it ended up. In this slide right here, this basically sums up the entire story we're about to unpack. The word prince started its life as Princeps, a title for the first citizen among equals. Today, it means an absolute, often hereditary ruler. So how on earth did that happen? This isn't just some boring change in a dictionary, it's a story about the changing shape of power itself. To really get this transformation, we have to rewind way back. We're going to the Roman Republic. This is where we find the original blueprint for what a princeps was actually meant to be. See, the original term was Princeps senatus. It literally means the first man of the Senate. This wasn't a job with a paycheck or an army, it was just an honor. In the incredibly powerful Roman Senate, the Princeps senatus was simply the most respected senior statesman who was given the privilege of speaking first. That's it.
Now, what's really important here is what this role wasn't. Sure, speaking first gave you immense influence. You could set the tone for the entire debate, but you had zero actual executive power. You couldn't command a legions or pass laws all by yourself. You were a guide, not a dictator. And here's the crucial part. Everyone understood that you were absolutely positively not a king.
And that little detail, that brings us to the central problem that drove this entire story. It was Rome's deep, profound, you could almost call it pathological hatred of kings. I mean, you just did not use the word rex in polite Roman society. It was way more than an insult. It was a political death sentence. To even be associated with the idea of kingship was to be linked with tyranny and everything the Romans had fought so hard to get away from. Their entire identity was built on this. They were proud citizens who governed themselves, not subjects or, as they saw it, slaves to some monarch. You gotta remember, their republic was born by overthrowing a tyrant, and they never, ever forgot it. Any politician who got a little too powerful, a little too popular, yeah, I'm looking at you, Julius Caesar, was immediately accused of wanting to be king. And that usually ended with a bunch of daggers in the Senate. So, you've got this huge crisis. Rome was broken, desperate for a leader, but absolutely terrified of a king. This is the perfect setup for our story's major turning point. Enter Augustus, with what has to be one of the most brilliant acts of political branding in all of human history. The context here is total chaos. Caesar's murder didn't save the Republic, not at all. It plunged it into more than a decade of vicious, bloody civil war. And out of that wreckage, one man emerges, Caesar's adopted son, Octavian. He had all the power, but he also remembered what happened to his great-uncle. He needed a whole new playbook. And this was his genius strategy, right here, in 3 steps. First, he kept all the old institutions, especially the Senate. He made it look like the Republic was still chugging along just fine. Second, he didn't invent some scary new title. He just adopted the old, safe Republican title of Princeps, first citizen. Totally harmless, right? But then, step 3, and this is the masterstroke. He quietly bolted on real, actual monarchical power. And the result was a brand new political system, the Principate. What he created was, for all intents and purposes, a monarchy wearing a republic costume. He called himself the first citizen, but he ruled for life with absolute authority. He solved the king taboo by just calling the kings something else. And if there was any doubt left about the reality of this new power, the Roman jurist Ulpian later made it crystal clear for everyone. He wrote, "The princeps is not bound by the laws." There it is. The first citizen was now officially above the law. The disguise was starting to slip, and the autocratic reality was being carved right into the legal code. So Augustus successfully embedded the idea of a single, all-powerful ruler into the friendly-sounding title of first citizen. Now we're going to see how this newly supercharged meaning kept evolving after the fall of Rome and through the centuries that followed. This table just lays out the journey perfectly. It starts in the Republic as an honor, a title of respect. In the Empire, it becomes a mask for an emperor. Then, in feudal Europe, the mask is completely off. Prince just means a sovereign, a monarch ruling their own territory. And finally, in our modern era, it gets even more specific, usually meaning the direct heir to a throne. The original connection to being a citizen is totally, completely gone. And if there's one person who really cemented this new autocratic meaning in our collective imagination, it's got to be Machiavelli. His famous book, The Prince, wasn't about a first citizen. Oh no, it was a handbook for a ruler with absolute power, a leader who was so far above the common people that he could basically invent his own rules, his own laws, even his own morality, just to stay in power. So after all that, why does tracing the history of one single word even matter? Well, because its story tells us something absolutely fundamental about the relationship between the language we use and the power it can hide. This right here, this is the core takeaway. When a political word changes its meaning this dramatically, it's not just semantics. It's a symptom of a much deeper change in society itself. The journey from first citizen to absolute ruler mirrors Europe's own journey from republican ideals to autocratic monarchies. The words are like the footprints left behind by history. So what can we really learn from this? Well, first, that language is an incredibly powerful political tool. Augustus used the word princeps to sneak around that king taboo. Second, the appearance of tradition, keeping the Senate, using an old title, can be a brilliant way to hide revolutionary change. And finally, and maybe most importantly for us today, the names we use for our leaders really, really matter. They can clarify power, but as we've just seen, they can also be used to disguise it. And that leaves us with one last thought. The story of Princeps isn't just ancient history. Words like democracy, freedom, elite, or patriot, they're all being debated and redefined constantly, right now as we speak. So the real question is, what political words do you see changing their meaning today? And what shifts in power might those changes be hiding?